Thursday night to you. I am Thabo Mdluli, and thank you for joining us tonight on the Newsfeed Late Night. President Cyril Ramaphosa has given his first oral responses in the National Assembly today for the first time since the new parliamentary term began. Ramaphosa answered several questions from opposition parties, which range from issues of governance to pressing political topics. But were they satisfied with the answers? Let's find out. We have with us UDM's Chief Whip, Nkwankwa. He joins me alongside DA leader John Steenhuisen, IFP Chief Whip Naren Singh, and EFF Treasurer General Umphile Maotwe. And of course, you're a part of this conversation tonight on Twitter at Newsroom 405, and you are dropping us your questions and comments on 072 110 5584. Umphile, good evening, gentlemen. Good evening as well to you, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening, and thank you.
Good evening to the viewers at home.
John, let's start with you. You're an angry young man who is waffling about factions in the ANC. Mind your business. How did you take that answer?
Well, I said to the president that the only people who worry about angry young men are out-of-touch old men. And the president showed today that he was very clearly an out-of-touch old man and was unable to get to grips with any of the key questions that were asked today. And we got a lot of waffle, but not a lot of facts on the table. And I think it was one of the president's weaker performances. I don't think that that he showed a command of the facts. I think he just repeated the same old lines that he's been trotting out, particularly on COVID-19, for the last few months. I don't think citizens are any the wiser as we sit here this evening about when they're getting their vaccines and how the president's going to administer the 340,000 vaccines every 2 days that we need if we're going to reach the 40 million target by the end of the year.
Are you disputing the contractual delivery schedule as the president delivered it today? I mean, in the Q2 of 2021, he says 3 million Johnson & Johnson doses will be delivered, 4.5 million Pfizer doses from a contract with Pfizer, 1.4 million Pfizer doses through the COVAX facility. Q3, 9.1 million, 8.5 million, all from Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer at this particular point. Is that plan or that schedule not believable to you, and what would make it believable?
He said himself today that those are just targets. He said that they may move according to circumstances. So it certainly wasn't anything that inspired much confidence. But here's the thing, and if you just get your calculator out and do the simple mathematics, we've got to put 340,000 vaccines every 2 days into the arms of South Africans if we're going to reach the 40 million mark of herd immunity by the end of the year. If we're only getting 350,000 vaccines per week, it's not going to be enough to go anywhere near the target. And bear in mind that to date, after 4 months, we've only vaccinated just over 320,000 South Africans. So it seems to be very, very ambitious. And certainly, I think the run rate has got far too far ahead of the president for him to be believed credibly about these things. We now have announced further delays now in the acquisition of some of those. We're sitting here in May, and not a single government jab has gone into a single arm in South Africa. The people that have been vaccinated to date, all part of the Sonke trial project, not a single vaccine acquired by government has gone into the single arm of a single South African. Now, many countries around the world, but even on the continent, are way ahead of us. A failed state like Zimbabwe, way ahead of us. Sierra Leone, Sudan, all these countries, way ahead of us. We're 33rd in the rankings in Africa for dealing with this virus. Now we have the potential new variant that's hit the shores coming in through Durban and the ship in the harbor there that's going to come to our shores. Winter's approaching, and our communities and our country is left vulnerable because we're the least vaccinated population in the world.
The initial goal for the government, seemingly, he says, the president, is to rapidly reduce the number of people who get very sick or die from COVID-19. And that will be a focus mainly in the first phase, looking at the elderly. I mean, are we past that stage where we need to just focus on the elderly, where we are now at a phase where we need to focus on the elderly and everyone else? Did we lose him there? I think we've lost Ngabayomzi on the line. All right, there you are. Nabayomzi, I'm asking you a question here. The president says the initial goal would be to vaccinate. All right, I think we're having a challenge with that connection. Let's go to you then, Umpile. You also, as the economic freedom fighters, asked for a plan from the president around the vaccination rollout and how that is going to be working out. The president speaks of over 3,000 vaccination centers that have already been approved and that are ready for action. He says the cold storage line has been put in place. He says people have been trained and staff has been particularly allocated for that. That will be full-time staff and will be taken care of via public funds. Is that a satisfactory answer for you? You've said if there's no plan, in fact, you will be demonstrating at all those centers.
The question is, where are those centers that he's talking about? This week is the week of oversight in Parliament. And we've asked many times, just give us 10 centers. We want to go and physically inspect ourselves and see and check if indeed this is happening. If you say to us, there's the training that has been done to health professionals, where? Because we coming from villages where the people in the villages, they don't know anything. They have not been trained on anything. So the president must just be honest with the nation to say there is no plan. I mean, the question today was very specific to say, give us the plan. President said there is a plan. What is the plan? Where? Where is that storage that he's talking about? And why is he failed to answer the question to say, why are you not allowing Sputnik and Sinovac vaccines to also be procured? Why are you only bringing us Johnson & Johnson when you can see that it was even suspended where it's coming from because it's not efficient? So the president does not have a plan. He must just be honest with us. And indeed, we are going to mobilize our people. We are going to mobilize our communities to go and station in those facilities that you say there are facilities that are ready. Because our people need vaccine. We are all traumatized right now, Thabo, of what is happening in India because there's no vaccination programs in South Africa. So if we are vaccinating our people, I mean, to date, we have not vaccinated anyone. We are still doing the test now. He's telling us about the vaccines that are still coming, but we're even scared to say they will come here expired already. We've seen the first lot being expiring. So the president must just be honest and say, there's no plan. What can we do? Because he's clueless about what really needs to be done now in this crisis that we're facing.
Yeah. Do you have a different set of facts at hand from your side to invalidate the claim that the president is saying here that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was shown to be more effective against the variant which was discovered here in South Africa?
Where was it efficient? Where? Because we've got reports that says the vaccine was not efficient. The efficacy is very low. Now, Sputnik has been proven in Russia that it is working. Sinovac is in China. It has been proven that it is working. Why is he not allowing for it? So that even the people themselves can have a choice to say, I want this one, I don't want that one. Why is he specifically choosing for the South Africans? Is it because the question that the president of the EFA was asking, is it because there's transactions that he's now being forced to enter into by the US because he's got some relationship with whoever? He must come clear on that. We want Sputnik because Sputnik, it has been proven, including Sinovac, that their efficacy is very, very high. So we want that. Allow the people to choose what they want.
Well, there are processes in the country underway where we are vaccinating health workers with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which those tests are, of course, being monitored, and that is where it's been proven to have worked. So I'm asking you, do you have a set of facts that say Sputnik V is working against this variant, and where is that data?
If Sputnik was to come here, you wouldn't need any tests because the tests have been done already at Thabo. You are testing now. You've wasted a month testing when that month could have been used to vaccinate the people. It has been proven to be working. Sinovac has been proven to be working. Why do you bring something that you first need to prove that it is working? In the meantime, people are losing their lives. Must we hold him accountable for the loss of life of our people that continues day in, day out, because he's busy with the test? When there is a vaccine that has been tested already that you can just give to people.
Part of what the president says today is, of course, a response to the question around whether or not stricter measures should be put in place, particularly seeing that there is a rise in infections in India. In fact, a huge rise. It's escalating numbers of people getting infected, and that new variant. The president saying, well, the National Coronavirus Command Council is still deliberating on that, and decisions will be made. Are they taking too long, and are you concerned at all at the pace at which they're deliberating on that question?
Tabo, right now, India is sitting at 20.2 million of infections. The 10 million comes from between last year, March and December. And then the additional 10 million comes from January 2021 to now. And the issue is there were elections on the 15th of April. Now, the elections meant that there's going to be physical contact of people, door-to-door campaigns, community meetings, rallies, religious gatherings, and everything else. And that's why you saw the spike in rise in infections in the month of April. So the president, what more proof does he really want? Because India has shown us that if you don't contain this, then this is how you can rapidly spread. In one day, 2 days ago, they recorded 357,000 infections in just 24 hours. Lord, what else do we need to do really to show the president that this thing is for us? Why are they still deliberating on it? Countries have already banned the travel to India, many countries. And what we're saying this thing again, Tabo, we said it last year, that president quarantined people that they came. The first flight that came here with people who were infected, we said to them, don't allow self-quarantine. No, they refused to listen to us. People went to self-quarantine, and then we saw the spread of corona. Now we're asking him, why there's still time? There's not a single, right now, infection that has been recorded, except for the ship that came now with 14 crew members coming from India, where all of them were infected. Now imagine, Tabo, with our non-existing health system in the country, what devastation will this bring to our people? This is the cry that you are crying to the president, to say, President, look at the numbers, listen to WHO. WHO reported that 46% of the infections, last month's infections, were coming from India. What more signs do our president really need to listen to the cry of our people?
All right, Umpile, let's take a break. We'll come back in a moment. We're asking you the question as well. Do you believe there is a comprehensive plan in place, logistics, resources that have been put towards the rollout of vaccines in the country? 072-110-5584. Let me know your views. Otherwise, tweet us at Newsroom405. We have the UDM Chief Whip, Nabayomzi coming to answer that question for us next, as well as John Stainless, and staying with us, IFP Chief Whip Naren Singh and EFF Treasurer General Umpile Mauja on the line with us. The Newsfeed Late Night continues next. Live on the Newsfeed Late Night, we continue now with your reporting here on Newsroom Africa, Channel 405, with a question, do you believe a comprehensive plan is in place? Resources have been mobilized, and there is indeed a steady supply of vaccines that we can expect coming to the country in the next couple of days, as based on the answers given by the president today. At Newsroom 405.072-110-5584. Let's get your views. UDM Chief Whip Nabayomzi, what did you make of the answers given by the president today? Is there a comprehensive plan in place?
No, unfortunately, there's no comprehensive plan in place. I mean, the answers that the president gave today on all the matters were very vague. I mean, if you were listening to the follow-up question by the Chief Whip of the the leader of the Democratic Alliance, he caught him off guard completely with the mathematics, which wasn't adding up in terms of the target that they've given themselves of about 40 million rands. But if you look at the vaccination rate, even per day and per week, is a joke, really. But I think the other issue for us is that not only does South Africa lack a coordinated and a comprehensive plan to deal with coronavirus, but you look at the African continent as a whole, there doesn't seem to be a comprehensive plan and a comprehensive approach of how to deal with the pandemic on the African continent. I mean, President Ramaphosa missed the opportunity when he was chair of the AU until at the beginning of the year. I haven't had even President Felix Tshisekedi talking about this issue. Because if there was a comprehensive plan, the continent would know how to deal with, for example, issues of India. You would not spend weeks and days deliberating when you know that India is facing a crisis, a major crisis on its hands. But the African continent as a whole would initiate a discussion to say the pharmaceutical companies that are on the continent, what role they need to play in order to try and help us to produce our own vaccine, and what kind of vaccine would we produce, what kind of resources and the scientific resources would require in order for us to be able to produce a vaccine that will be able to deal with all the variants of the coronavirus as it mutates. These are discussions, strategic discussions that people like President Ramaphosa and leaders of the continent should be having. But South Africa, first and foremost, is not even able to outline its plan for the next 12 months. I want to give another example. We know that there's a third wave coming up. There's a rise in infections in South Africa caused obviously by the India issue. But you've also announced an election date towards the end of the year. You don't have, you are only talking in terms of your plan, in terms of vaccines that you're saying you've acquired, they are still in the pipeline, things that are still going to be implemented, and yet you've already announced the election date. It's illogical, because then how do you ensure that around that period infections do not rise? How do you ensure that by the time you get to elections that many people, the greatest number of people in South Africa have already been vaccinated? That is not the discussion we're having around the table. It's almost like what the government is doing is announcing an election date, saying we've placed orders, we're acquiring vaccines, and then hope for the best. The leaders are supposed to take all the precautionary measures to make sure that when the elections do take place towards the end of the year, that people's lives aren't put unnecessarily at risk. We have proposed, for example, that the elections can take place next year or even the year after next, at a time when we think that it's safe for all South Africans to do so. You have a government that does not have a comprehensive plan to deal with the coronavirus, but that wants to rush the country to elections. It makes no sense. Unless another plan or the government of South Africa makes another, say, press conference to detail its plan, comprehensive plan to fight COVID, I am not convinced that what we had today is actually going to help the country in any shape or form.
Naren, it's an enormous undertaking, Naren Singh, that will require, of course, government's coordinated effort, but also support and cooperation from other parties. Is it difficult right now to give support to this plan of the president, and are opposition parties just not willing to support it?
Thabo, good evening, and good evening to my colleagues and to your viewers. Thabo, let me answer your question that you posed to everybody else. Is there a plan? And my answer to that, yes, there is a plan. The question should be, is that plan implementable? And the answer to that is no. Because we've seen these plans on the table, and plans will remain plans if they are not in a position to be implemented with the necessary human and financial resources. Now, we're more than a year into COVID. We've heard a lot of promises being made. We still haven't gone through the healthcare sector yet, from whichever source the vaccines were provided. We haven't gone through them yet. When are we going to get through the rest of South Africa? Now, I was reading the other day, I phoned a relative of mine in the UK, and he told me on the one Saturday, they had vaccinated 500,000 people, just over 500,000 people. Now, what we need to do is, if the vaccines come into our country as swiftly as the president says it can come, from information he receives from the council and his minister, then we need to have more than these 3,000 vaccination centers. We need 30,000 of them. And we need to make sure that we involve the private sector, the pharmacies and all sorts of people in rural areas, urban areas, peri-urban areas, to ensure that when the vaccines are here, they are able to be administered as swiftly as possible. Whether it's Sputnik or Rocket or whatever it is, I don't think I'm in a position to say anything about that. I'm not a scientist, but what we need is the most effective vaccine to be administered as swiftly as possible to the people of South Africa, so we don't find ourselves in a catastrophic situation like India. I mean, we've been talking about India. And India, what has happened, my colleagues are quite correct, it's the elections, that they had huge rallies and also very, very large religious festivals that runs into attendance of millions of people that attend these festivals. And I think the government there should have been more circumspect in allowing these things to take place without having the kind of restrictions that one should be imposing for numbers.
Do you think the big deal that the president is making around the TRIPS waiver at the World Trade Organization will enable the African continent in particular to ramp up production of these vaccines? And is there something that we should pay particular focus into, or does it split our focus and maybe distract us from focusing on just acquiring vaccines ourselves right now?
Yeah, I think all the parties here, all my colleagues have been speaking about, the vaccines being produced here in South Africa. And I don't think adequate opportunities were given to organizations to be able to do that and get their vaccines approved on time. And hence, I think from the word go, we were relying on import until we realized that the AstraZeneca that we brought in was not going to be effective in our country. We are always falling behind in terms of our own innovation, our own inventions, promoting our own companies to provide for the people of South Africa. And I think we lost many opportunities, but we can't go backwards now. The only thing for us to do is to live in hope, in the understanding that whatever is on the table now can be done as swiftly as possible. And as the IFP, we would support any move by government to accelerate vaccinations to the people of South Africa.
Now, of course, the other question, John, is around the developmental capacity of the country, our ethical orientation, but also the question around capabilities generally in South Africa to navigate a recovery of this economy. The president speaking of 300,000 jobs that have been created through the presidential stimulus package. He's talking also of a number of initiatives that are seeking to build infrastructure. I mean, are those convincing things that indeed our capacity is solid as a developmental state and we are heading in the right direction as far as ethical and ethical orientation?
Again, I think we've got lots of plans, but not much implementation. And the real problem we have now is that we have an incapable state that has been hollowed out over decades through cadre deployment. We have people put into positions not on their ability to do the job, but on their connections with the governing party. And I think we've seen those laid bare at the Zondo Commission. But what that's essentially done is rendered the state incapable of doing the most basic of things. So, for instance, during the coronavirus pandemic, when the government did take one or two of the DA's good ideas on board, which, using the UIF and TERS program, using the social grant system to be able to bring relief to families, when they pressed the button on that, it was a complete disaster because you've got an incapable state. And the point I made to the president today is that until he is prepared to walk away from cadre deployment, he's going to continue to have an incapable state. We've got to build a capable state, and that starts by building an independent civil service that is staffed and equipped by people who can actually do the job and are there because they have the ability to do so. And, if the president's going to continue to double down on cadre deployment going forward, I can tell you we're going to sit in 10 years' time with another Zondo Commission, but this time we're going to be looking at all the deployees, not of the Zuma administration, we're going to look at all the deployees of the Ramaphosa administration that has potentially stopped the civil service with his allies. What we need is a professional civil service in South Africa that serves the needs of the people of the country and not the politicians or a small clique of the elite. And until you have that, you can have the best laid plans in the world. They're going to gather dust and drawers at the union buildings because you simply don't have the capacity on the ground to deliver it. And every one of these big targets that we see get announced every year at the SONA, very few of them ever come to fruition because there is no ability
that's
to be
not what
able
he's
to deliver.
saying here. I mean, saying here it's not a plan is a report back of some sort to say 650,000 opportunities through a wide range of programs for people who otherwise would have been unemployed have been created. He cites like I mentioned, 300,000 education assistants, 100,000 workers in early childhood development, 50,000 opportunities being created in public employment programs, and 2,000 artisans that have been hired by the Department of Public Works. Doesn't sound much like current employment.
These are government jobs. They're not. You're bloating your civil service again through government jobs. These are not jobs that are being created to serve people in South Africa. And if that was so great, why has our unemployment rate jumped up to 42.6% on the expanded list? The president's doing such a great job in creating all these jobs. Why does our employment continue to rise? The last quarter saw a massive leap up in unemployment. It's one of the biggest issues facing South Africans at the moment. So you may be creating, he says 300,000 jobs there, but if you're losing 3 million jobs, as we did during the first two stages of the pandemic, it's cancelled out. So, I think the president mustn't claim easy victories. It's easy to say you've created so many public works jobs. As many of us know, those are below the minimum wage. They're essentially top labor jobs. They're not stable. And, what people want in South Africa are real jobs, and those are created through a growing economy that starts to employ more people.
I'm going to get Peter to respond to that when we come back from the break as well. Is this, or do they see this, the EFF, as part of the government-sponsored or government-funded recovery that they are calling for, as well as the economic freedom fighters? We're back in a moment with you here on the Newsfeed Late Night. Let's get your views on Twitter at Newsroom 405 072 110 5584 with your WhatsApp comments tonight. UDM Chief Whip Ngabayomzi Kwankwa, he's joined there alongside DA Leader John Steinhays and IFP Chief Whip Naren Singh and EFF Treasurer General Umpile Maotwe. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Back with you here on the Newsfeed Late Night tonight, discussing the Q&A session the president had in the National Assembly. How do you feel the president accorded himself, and did he answer some of the critical questions that you wanted answered as well? As far as capacity building, government's orientation towards ethical conduct, as well as our own ability to turn around the economy is concerned, the government pointing out to some 650,000 opportunities created through the presidential stimulus employment program in various programs. Umpile, part of what the Deputy President of the EFF has said, that the austerity budget contributes to underdevelopment and poverty, saying the recovery needs to be funded through the state coffers. Do you see this 650,000 opportunities that are funded by government as a step in the right direction?
It's not, Thabo. So the government does not have plans really to grow the economy of this country, because if they did, they'll be embarking in industrialization. If you can't industrialize and produce and sell to the international market, you are not going to do anything. You can say you've created opportunities, but what are those opportunities? Just yesterday, we were at Transnet on an oversight, and the CEO was very proud that he's developing SMMEs to come into space. And when we asked, doing what exactly? He was telling us about the pit cleaning. He was telling us about cleaning services that they've done. And I said to him, CEO, you've got more than 3,000 components in a locomotive. Now, are you saying you are leaving that market untouched, unattended? You are putting our people to be pit cleaners instead of producing components that go into a locomotive. Now, let me give you an example with what he's trying to do at Devonport. So he says, because of inefficiency of the port, which is the question that I was kicked out of Parliament for, and I'm still very aggrieved for that. He says that he has invited private sector to come on board. Now, let me tell you what's happening at Devonport. Devonport is very efficient. Devonport is the most largest and busiest port in the country. It's the second biggest in the continent. Why are you solving a problem that doesn't exist? If the problem is efficiency, then come up with programs that respond to efficiency. Don't come up with now a bunch of private sector people whom you say they are bringing in efficiency. The Transnet has been in operation for over 160 years now. Before Gama was the CEO, Transnet could not even produce a single locomotive. And guess what? It took a political will and the love of the country for Transnet to produce the very first locomotive built by Africans for Africa here in Africa. After 150 years of just being maintainers of this rolling stock that was coming from END and GE. So if you don't industrialize, if you don't manufacture, if you don't produce and sell to the international market, you will never ever grow the economy. If he says to you that he has created jobs and he's talking about government jobs, what exactly are the people in government doing except pushing paper? What are government employees producing? Who is maintaining the roads? Who is building the roads? Who is manufacturing who is in the pharmaceutical?
So Umpi, are you saying there is no challenge at the Durban port currently of congestion and maybe also a need to modernize the port and how it operates, and also to expand the port's capacity at this particular point from handling 2.89 million units to 11 million units of cargo? Is that not a good thing as part of growing, expanding industrialization and getting more people employed?
So there's congestion at Durban ports, Thabo, and it's brought about by its nature of it being busy and being the largest. And I'm saying to you, if there's any efficiency is not being addressed by bringing private sector. Efficiency is addressed by bringing in programs that deals directly with the efficiency. And I made an example in Parliament of Lean Six Sigma program. Transnet has embarked on a Lean Six Sigma, which is a manufacturing program that streamlines the processes. And we've seen how production went from 10% to 90% just with that program. So you don't need the private sector to come and help you with efficiency. Internally, Transnet has got the capacity. There are employees of Transnet who are black belts on Lean Six Sigma who can do that task. And Thabo, yes, we need to expand Durban Port. That's definite. Durban Port is efficient as it stands. That's why it's competing even globally. But we're saying if you want to expand it, give opportunity to Transnet to expand it themselves. We have done it at Transnet Engineering. We built a locomotive. It's running there, Thabo, next to you in Pretoria. Go and check it there. It's there. Something that we were told for over 150 years that no, you cannot do. So I'm saying let's allow Transnet to expand. They've been operating the ports for all these years. Allow them to expand. Let me tell you why he's bringing the private sector. So IMF and the World Bank proposed that the private sector must be brought in. And this was also sneaked into the National Treasury economic strategy to have a private sector. But that was never adopted by Parliament. Now, President Ramaphosa wants to smuggle that idea through the back door. It was never a policy of government. If it is, he must tell us when was it adopted. And he's doing this because he must answer the question whether he's doing this because he's under pressure now to give business to his people who funded his CR70 campaign. Because that's the only logical explanation that you can get. We've got engineers. The engineers are black belts, Thabo, as you speak. I can even give you the names of them. I'm coming from Transnet. I know what I'm talking about.
Let's hear the view of the IFP on that one as well. Naren, it's a very important national asset, that the port. Is it due for an upgrade, and are we going about it the right way, getting, I think it's 100 billion rands from the private sector?
Yeah, Thabo, you see, it's not only about efficiency, it's also about growth. And there are tremendous opportunities for that port to become a real, world leader, world-class leader in terms of handling the cargo. Now, I live on the coast, and Honorable John Steenhuisen also, and sometimes when you notice the number of ships that are berthed outside the harbor, and you wonder what is actually happening. So anything to improve efficiency and grow that port is a good idea. And I don't think it's fair on the president to say that he wants this public-private sector partnership. It is Transnet that came up with the idea and invited the president to launch the project. So it's Transnet themselves saying, well, perhaps we don't have the adequate resources to be able to meet the increasing demands. We want to be world leaders, so let us enter into this initiative. But having said that, we mustn't be allow ourselves to be in a position where the sovereignty of the country and our state assets and the crown jewels and the silver is being sold off to the private sector. But we as the IFP see no problem in constructive partnerships, profitable partnerships, bringing the private sector and the state together, because, I mean, by all accounts, look at all state-owned enterprises, absolute dismal failure. And you just need to bring in somebody else with a new idea, and I think things will turn around in this country without compromising labor force, without bringing technology in to an extent where you're going to discard labor. But I think there are ways and means, and it's tried and tested around the world in Singapore and other countries, where public-private sector partnerships work to the benefit of the country, promote economic growth, promote more jobs. But, and that's what we would support as the IFP, and we always maintain that.
Kabeomzi, your proposal for heavier voting on the matter of the public protector has seemingly been denied by Parliament. You've got a response to that?
Well, we haven't received an official response from the Speaker's office yet. But I was part of a meeting with the Rules Committee yesterday where Honorable Singh and members from other parties were part of that discussion. And as you might already be aware, yes, indeed, our request for a weighted voting system to be introduced during that impeachment process was declined. However, as a party, we have to obviously wait for formal correspondence from the Speaker, because remember, the process is the Speaker referred the matter to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee, after having applied its mind to our proposal, has decided to decline our request. Then the Rules Committee will have to provide a report back to the Speaker, who will intend and write to the UDM. But the bottom line is, I think I made that very categorically clear yesterday, that we are not going to allow a situation where tomorrow, or rather when that committee, those proceedings take place, that we are going to serve or play the role of bridesmaids at the wedding of probably the three largest parties. We are there as duly elected members of Parliament who represent a constituency, and we want, it's our right to be able to vote in those proceedings when the final decision is made and when the report of that committee is adopted. Remember, we mustn't just look at this thing narrowly from the perspective of voting, but also it's political parties, it's voting members that are able to introduce a minority report in a committee such as that one. So we want to be able to enjoy all the rights as members, duly elected members of Parliament that represent constituencies whose voices must be heard through us. And when a decision is taken, we must be able to vote either in favor or against whatever decision is taken or whatever report that committee is going to adopt at the end of the process.
So are you seeking judicial recourse then on that decision? Or you want to seek judicial recourse, hence you want it to be formally put to you?
Without any shadow of doubt, if needs be, we are going to take the matter to court. But all that we are waiting for is due process to be followed. In this instance, I'm referring specifically to the Speaker's response to the party. Since we wrote to the Speaker, if the Speaker responds to us and confirms the decision that was taken by the Rules Committee, we are going to take the matter to court, without a doubt.
John Steenhuisen, what's your response to that? Are you trying to stifle the voice of the smaller parties?
No, not at all. I wasn't part of that meeting. My chief whip was there. But certainly from what I've seen, the general rule in Parliament is that there is a proportional representation of all the parties in the House. There are special dispensations made for committees like that would give the smaller parties a seat at the committee. But when it comes to voting, that the will of the electorate has to be represented in the weighting of the voting. And that was the position that was put forward by the Democratic Alliance. But we were very, very supportive of expanding the committee to ensure that at the very least the smaller parties were able to participate in the process. But I do think that voting in Parliament has to represent the mandate that have been given to each parties around by the electorate. But obviously this is an ongoing discussion in Parliament. This is not the first time it's come up. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time it's come up. And I imagine that, like all things, rules will evolve over time. But at the moment, the practice in Parliament is it's done on a proportional basis.
Time always the enemy. We have to leave it there for tonight. I appreciate you all for joining us today. UDM Chief Whip Nabayomzi Ngwangwa, joined there by DA Leader John Steinhays and IFP Chief Whip Naren Singh and EFF Treasurer General Umpile Maoto. Thank you for your engagements as well tonight. The Newsfeed Late Night continues next. Who will be the next Chief Justice in South Africa? That's the question. We'll get the answers in a moment. Stay with us.